Hey everybody, welcome back to Gaming Bench. I'm here today with Star Wars Outlaws, and I'm going to be looking at some GPUs on the lower end of the spectrum. The Nvidia RTX 4060 with 8GB of VRAM, and AMD's somewhat similarly priced. It's a little bit more expensive, but the RX 7600 XT that has 16GB of RAM. Now, I could have looked at AMD's RX 7600 that costs less than the 4060, but I already know that the 8GB is going to be a serious problem on AMD's side, so I thought I'd stick with the slightly more expensive card that might have a better chance of running the game. You can see here we've got the 4060 and 7600 XT running side by side, AMD on the right, Nvidia on the left, and at 1080p low settings, the 4060 does pretty well. It's averaging above 60 frames per second, and the 7600 XT is a little bit slower than that at around 70ish frames per second. Let's go ahead and bump things up a level to the high setting, and quality only improves a little bit. Like, you could go ultra and it still doesn't make that much of a difference, but it will further drop the frame rates. We're running native here, TAA at 100% scaling, no upscaling, no frame generation, so this is kind of apples to apples as we can get it. And the 4060 again still ahead. It's a little closer now. It's about maybe 7-8% faster. The 7600 XT is still struggling a little bit on minimums, but I mean it's totally playable. Like, you could run either card this way on Star Wars Outlaws and it's fine. Just to show you the extreme, let's go ahead and turn on the ultra settings with the RT Ultra, Ray Tracing Ultra. This kills performance, and you can see here the 4060, it's doing a lot better than the 7600 XT, pulling around 20ish frames per second compared to like 13 frames per second. So neither one is really playable. You could do upscaling and maybe get to slightly better results, but upscaling at 1080p is really kind of a crapshoot and doesn't always look good. So this is why I'm not going to say much more about ray tracing. In fact, I've talked about this on the RTX 4080 Super versus RX 7900 XTX running Star Wars Outlaws, and the reality is the ray tracing mostly improves the shadows and lightings a little bit. It doesn't do much with reflections, and it's another case of like an overhyped ray tracing game. I can't really emphasize that enough, that ray tracing in Star Wars Outlaws as it stands really doesn't seem to add much other than super poor performance even on the highest end GPUs. And let's go ahead and get back to testing these cards, and let's look at a higher resolution. So here we're running at 1440p, and now you can see the cards are starting to struggle. The 4060 is still faster, it's got more compute, and this isn't an Nvidia promoted title, so let's not forget that. And it's doing about 40 frames per second, maybe almost 10% faster than the 7600 XT that's doing like 36-37 frames per second. Neither one is an amazing experience, and if you go outdoors, like this is in a city, if you go outside and run around the wide open spaces, performance can drop severely, and I blame Ubisoft for that more than anything. Like, I just don't think they've optimized the Snowdrop engine well for the wide open vistas that they're showing in the areas of Star Wars Outlaws. Space battles, I think, are another area where you can get pretty high performance because there's not nearly as much stuff going on, but when you're outdoors, you really I can't emphasize that strongly enough. It can be pretty chuggish at times, and I think there might be a lot of optimizations. So this is launch performance. There's a patch promising to reduce the VRAM workload and improve and optimize performance, so we'll see how that fares in the coming days. Let's go ahead and kick things up a notch just for fun to 4K, high settings again, and no ray tracing. I can't say it's actually no ray tracing because it's not clear in the menus. There's like an Nvidia RTX direct lighting setting that really tanks performance, which is what I did on the 1080p stuff. But if you go into the advanced settings, there's like 5 ray tracing options listed, and I'm not entirely clear if they're saying they actually have ray tracing even without the what is it, like Nvidia RTX DI or whatever enabled. But regardless, like, performance here, it's about the same as 1080p with maxed out settings for the 4060. Does a little better on the 7600 XT. Like, we're getting 20 frames per second on the 4060, about 18 frames per second on AMD. Not lovely. Not like the greatest experience you've ever seen. So let's see what we can do to fix that. So let's take 4K, high settings. turn on FSR 3 and frame generation, or DLSS 3 with frame generation, and oh my word, like, look at this Nvidia, the 4060 with frame generation and DLSS 3, just, it breaks. There's no other way to put it. I've tested it on other cards and it works okay and can actually deliver a playable result, but here, like, every time I tried turning it on, I just got this severe stuttering, and like, it's like interpolating between the wrong frames or whatever. So we'll drop that and we'll just stick with FSR 3 and frame generation on both GPUs. And interesting, AMD closes the gap with the Nvidia card here, so it makes up that like 10% difference that we saw at native 4K. And, you know, they're both delivering about 45, 46 frames per second. Playable, not amazing. Keep in mind though, frame generation means that the actual rendered frame rate is going to be half the frames to monitor rate. So when we see 46 frames per second, that means it's running at 23 frames per second and then interpolating and doubling that for extra frames. So it feels with the mouse and keyboard more like a 23 frames per second game, while it looks to your eyes and in this video like a 46 frames per second game. So it actually looks better in this video than how it feels, because you can feel that input lag on the mouse for sure. Frame generation, not like my favorite technology. It's one of those marketing terms more than anything. Anyway, here's the final charts at both 1080p. We'll look at that first, and you can see here Nvidia's 4060 beats the 7600 XT at each of the three settings that we tested: low, high, and then RT Ultra. And then if we kick up to higher resolutions, the frame generation 4K result pops to the very top at 46 frames per second. 1440p sits at 41 on the 4060 and 37 on the 7600 XT. And then finally at 4K native, we've got 20 on the 4060 and 18 on the 7600 XT. So again, Nvidia promoted game, keep that in mind. Things could change and improve over the coming days. But right now, Nvidia hardware is running Star Wars Outlaws better, with or without ray tracing. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, tell all your friends about this. I'd love to get more viewers on my channel, and more importantly, like, tell me what you want to see benchmarked. I'm willing to test pretty much any game that makes sense, you know, like a game that will push your GPU, not like a super lightweight 2D title that runs on a potato, but, you know, something that's a little demanding. So tell me what you'd like to see benchmarked, and I will see if I can make that happen. I probably can. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.